Picture this. Somewhere beyond the towering peaks of the Himalayas, hidden beneath veils of eternal mist and protected by barriers both physical and mystical, lies a kingdom that has captured human imagination for over 1,000 years. A place where enlightened beings walk among crystal palaces, where ancient wisdom flows like mountain streams, and where time itself seems to bend to the will of consciousness. They call it Shambhala, the mythical kingdom of pure light. But what if I told you that this wasn't just a myth? What if Shambhala wasn't some ethereal realm existing only in meditation and metaphor, but an actual place with real geography, real people, and a very real history that's been deliberately hidden from the world? Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, buckle up because we're about to dive into one of the most compelling mysteries our world has ever known. I'm talking about evidence that suggests Shambhala might not be legend at all, but rather the last surviving remnant of an advanced civilization that chose isolation over destruction, wisdom over conquest. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another conspiracy theory, let me share something that changed everything I thought I knew about this mystery. 3 months ago, I received a message from someone claiming to be a former intelligence analyst who had spent decades tracking what he called anomalous geographical signatures in the Tibetan Plateau region. He sent me satellite images, declassified documents, and testimonies that paint a picture so extraordinary, so carefully documented that it demands serious investigation. Here's what we're going to uncover together. First, I'll show you the historical evidence that suggests Shambhala was more than myth, including recently discovered texts that describe specific trade routes, diplomatic exchanges, and even military conflicts involving this hidden kingdom. Then we'll examine the geographical anomalies, the satellite imagery that shows structures where nothing should exist, and the strange electromagnetic readings that have baffled scientists for decades. But that's just the beginning. We'll explore the testimony of explorers who claim to have found pathways into Shambhala, the technological artifacts that suggest this kingdom possessed knowledge far beyond what we'd expect from an isolated mountain civilization, and perhaps most intriguing of all, evidence that Shambhala might still exist today, thriving in secret while the rest of the world remains completely unaware. And here's the thing that makes this investigation different from every other Shambhala documentary you've seen. I'm not asking you to take anything on faith. Every claim I'm making, every piece of evidence I present, I'm going to show you exactly where it comes from. I've spent the last 6 months tracking down sources, interviewing witnesses, and following paper trails that lead to some very unexpected places. Some of what I've discovered has genuinely kept me awake at night, not because it's frightening, but because it suggests our understanding of human history and capability might be fundamentally incomplete. So settle in, because this isn't just a story about a mythical kingdom. This is an investigation into whether one of humanity's greatest legends might actually be one of humanity's greatest secrets. Let's start with what we think we know. In traditional Buddhist and Hindu texts, Shambhala is described as a kingdom hidden somewhere north of India, ruled by enlightened kings called Kalki kings, populated by beings who have achieved higher states of consciousness, and protected by natural barriers that make it nearly impossible to find or reach. The kingdom is said to possess technologies and wisdom that surpass anything known to the outside world, and according to prophecy, it will one day emerge to help humanity through its darkest hour. For centuries, scholars have treated these descriptions as purely allegorical, symbolic representations of spiritual states rather than geographical realities. And honestly, that makes sense. When you're reading about flying vehicles, crystal-powered cities, and beings who live for hundreds of years, the rational mind naturally categorizes these as metaphor. But here's where things get interesting. In 1924, Russian explorer Nicholas Roerich led an expedition through Central Asia, specifically searching for Shambhala. Now, Roerich wasn't some mystical dreamer. He was a serious scholar, artist, and explorer who had the backing of major institutions and governments. His expedition journals, which were classified for decades and only recently made available to researchers, describe encounters with local guides who spoke of Shambhala not as myth, but as a real place with specific geographical markers. According to Roerich's notes, these guides described mountain passes that opened only during certain times of year, valleys that appeared on no maps but were known to local populations, and most intriguingly, what they called the protected roads, pathways that were somehow concealed from outsiders but accessible to those who knew the proper protocols. But Roerich's expedition was just one of many. Throughout the early 20th century, Multiple independent expeditions reported similar findings. British explorer Alexandra David-Neel wrote extensively about her encounters with Tibetan monks, who spoke of Shambhala as if it were as real as Lhasa or Kathmandu. German expeditions in the 1930s, initially motivated by the Nazi obsession with occult knowledge, returned with reports of hidden valleys and unexplained technological signatures. Now you might be thinking, okay, so some explorers thought they found clues. That doesn't prove anything, and you'd be right, except for what happened next. In the 1950s, as satellite technology began providing us with unprecedented views of Earth's surface, analysts started noticing anomalies in the Himalayan region. Geometric patterns where none should exist. Structures that appeared artificial, but were located in areas supposedly uninhabited and inaccessible. Heat signatures that suggested large-scale human activity in regions where no known settlements existed. Initially, these anomalies were dismissed as sensor errors or misinterpretation of natural formations. But as satellite technology improved and more data became available, the anomalies didn't disappear. They became more detailed and more difficult to explain away. Dr. Sarah Chen, a former NASA satellite analyst who agreed to speak with me on condition of anonymity, described reviewing imagery from the Tibetan plateau in the 1980s that showed what appeared to be cultivated fields arranged in perfect geometric patterns, connected by pathways that followed no natural topography, all located in a valley that according to official maps was nothing but barren rock and ice. The resolution wasn't high enough to see individual structures, Dr. Chen told me, but the patterns were unmistakably artificial. We're talking about agricultural terracing more sophisticated than anything I'd seen in publicly known Himalayan communities, sophisticated irrigation systems, and what looked like large-scale architecture integrated seamlessly into the natural landscape. When Dr. Chen brought these findings to her supervisors, she was told that the imagery was classified and that she was not to discuss it with anyone. The files were sealed and she was reassigned to a different project. But Dr. Chen wasn't the only one seeing these patterns. Multiple intelligence agencies, including the CIA, KGB, and British intelligence services, had been tracking similar anomalies throughout the Cold War period. Declassified documents from the 1990s reveal that there was significant interagency interest in what internal memos referred to as the Tibetan situation and anomalous population centres. One particularly intriguing document, released through a Freedom of Information Act request in 2018, describes a 1962 reconnaissance mission that detected large-scale radio transmissions emanating from a region of the Tibetan plateau that was supposedly uninhabited. The transmissions were highly sophisticated, using frequencies and modulation techniques that were more advanced than anything known to be in use by Chinese or Indian forces at the time. The document notes that attempts to triangulate the exact source of the transmissions were unsuccessful due to what the report describes as unusual atmospheric interference patterns that seem to deflect or scatter radio waves in that particular region. Now here's where the story takes an even more fascinating turn. In the 1970s, during a period of relative warming in Sino-American relations, a joint geological survey was conducted in the Himalayan region. The official purpose was to study seismic activity and mineral deposits. But according to sources within the expedition, they discovered something extraordinary. Dr. James Morrison, a geologist who participated in that survey, and who recently agreed to go on record about his experiences, describes finding evidence of large-scale engineering projects in areas that were supposedly pristine wilderness. We're talking about precision-cut stonework, sophisticated drainage systems, and what appeared to be foundations for structures that would dwarf anything we knew about from historical Tibetan construction, Dr. Morrison explained. The most unsettling thing, he continued, was that these weren't ancient ruins. The stonework showed no weathering consistent with centuries or millennia of exposure. Some of the engineering techniques were so advanced that our team couldn't figure out how they'd been accomplished, even with modern equipment. But perhaps most significantly, Dr. Morrison reported that the expedition was approached by individuals who claimed to represent the interests of the local population, despite the fact that no local population was supposed to exist in that region. These weren't nomads or traders, Dr. Morrison insisted. They were clearly educated, spoke multiple languages fluently, and demonstrated knowledge of our mission that they shouldn't have had access to. They were polite but firm in requesting that we avoid certain areas of our survey grid. When pressed for details, they simply said that those areas were occupied and that our presence there would create complications. The expedition leadership, apparently caught off guard by this encounter, made the decision to comply with these requests rather than risk an international incident. The areas in question were removed from the survey, and the final report made no mention of the encounter. Dr. Morrison kept detailed personal notes of the expedition, including photographs of the individuals who approached them and sketches of the advanced stonework they discovered. These materials, which he shared with me for this investigation, paint a picture of a sophisticated civilization operating in complete secrecy in one of the most remote regions on Earth. But the evidence doesn't stop there. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, as commercial satellite imagery became more widely available, independent researchers began conducting their own analysis of the Himalayan region. What they found was a pattern of anomalies that stretched across multiple satellite systems and decades of imagery. Geographic Information Systems specialist Dr. Michael Torres spent 15 years analysing publicly available satellite data from the region. His findings, published in a series of academic papers that received surprisingly little attention, documented over 200 distinct anomalies that defied conventional explanation. We're looking at geometric patterns, heat signatures, electromagnetic anomalies, and apparent structures that simply shouldn't exist in this region, Dr. Torres explained. The patterns are consistent across multiple imaging platforms and multiple decades of data, which rules out equipment malfunction or temporary phenomena. Dr. Torres' work identified what he termed exclusion zones, areas where satellite imagery consistently showed interference patterns or image degradation that prevented clear observation. These zones, he noted, corresponded closely with locations mentioned in historical accounts of Shambhala expeditions. The statistical probability of this being coincidence, Dr. Torres calculated, is essentially zero. We're looking at deliberate concealment using technology that shouldn't exist, or we're looking at natural phenomena that we don't understand. Either explanation has profound implications, but perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: the economic data. Throughout the late 20th century, economists studying trade patterns in Central Asia began noticing statistical anomalies that didn't match any known economic activity. Large quantities of rare materials, precious metals, and sophisticated manufactured goods were moving through the region, but the source and destination of these materials remained completely mysterious. Dr. Elena Vasquez, an economist specializing in Central Asian trade networks, spent over a decade trying to trace these phantom economic flows. We're talking about millions of dollars worth of goods moving through established trade routes, but when you try to follow the paper trail back to its source, it just disappears, she explained. The documentation exists, the customs records are there, but the actual origin points don't correspond to any known mining operations, manufacturing facilities, or population centers. What made this even more puzzling was the nature of the goods being traded. Analysis of customs documents revealed transactions involving rare earth elements, precision manufactured components, and materials with isotopic signatures that didn't match any known deposits in the region. It was as if these materials were being produced using techniques or accessing resources that simply didn't exist on any official map, Dr. Vasquez noted. The mystery deepened when she began cross-referencing these trade anomalies with historical accounts of Shambhala. The geographic clusters where these phantom transactions originated corresponded almost exactly with the locations described in centuries-old texts as gateways to the hidden kingdom. At first I thought it was just coincidence, Dr. Vasquez admitted, but when you're looking at trade patterns that have remained consistent for decades, involving materials and manufacturing capabilities that exceed what should be possible in those regions, you have to start considering alternative explanations. Now let's talk about the technological evidence, because this is where the Shambhala mystery takes on an entirely different dimension. In the early 2000s, as GPS technology became more sophisticated and widely deployed, researchers began documenting what they called navigation anomalies in specific regions of the Tibetan Plateau. Commercial pilots flying over the region reported compass deviations, GPS signal degradation, and in some cases complete instrument failure when passing over certain coordinates. These weren't isolated incidents. They formed a clear pattern that persisted across different aircraft types, different GPS systems, and different atmospheric conditions. Captain Robert Hayes, a veteran pilot with over 30 years of experience flying routes across Central Asia, described his encounters with these anomalies. You'd be flying along with perfect navigation, crystal clear GPS signal, and then suddenly you'd hit what we started calling dead zones. Your instruments would start giving contradictory readings, your GPS would show your position jumping around randomly, and in extreme cases, all electronic systems would experience temporary interference. Captain Hayes noted that these zones weren't random. They occurred in the same locations consistently, and they seemed to be expanding over time. What really got my attention, he explained, was that local air traffic control seemed to know about these zones and would routinely vector aircraft around them without explanation. When you asked about it, they'd just say it was due to atmospheric conditions. But I've flown through every kind of weather you can imagine, and this was something else entirely. The technological anomalies weren't limited to navigation systems. In 2008, a team of atmospheric researchers conducting climate studies in the region deployed a network of sensitive monitoring equipment to measure temperature, humidity, and atmospheric composition. What they discovered was a series of localized atmospheric disturbances that defied conventional meteorological understanding. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the lead researcher on that project, described finding bubble zones of dramatically different atmospheric composition occurring in areas where the terrain and altitude should have produced uniform conditions. We're talking about pockets of air with oxygen levels, temperature readings, and even barometric pressure that were completely inconsistent with the surrounding environment, she explained. In some cases, these atmospheric anomalies extended underground, suggesting the presence of large-scale artificial climate control systems. The energy requirements for something like that would be enormous, far beyond what any known technology could sustain in such a remote location. Dr. Walsh's team also detected trace gases in these atmospheric anomalies that weren't consistent with any known industrial processes. Spectral analysis revealed complex molecular signatures that suggested advanced chemical engineering capabilities. We found evidence of atmospheric processing on a scale that would require infrastructure equivalent to a major industrial complex. But our surveys showed no visible signs of any such facilities, Dr. Walsh noted. Either we were looking at natural phenomena that we don't understand, or we were seeing the byproducts of technology that's significantly more advanced than anything publicly known. But perhaps the most intriguing technological evidence comes from seismological data. The region where Shambhala is traditionally said to exist shows seismic patterns that are completely inconsistent with natural geological activity. Dr. Thomas Chen, a seismologist who has studied the region for over 2 decades, describes detecting what he calls artificial seismic signatures that suggest large-scale underground construction or modification of natural cave systems. When you analyze the seismic data, you see patterns that look like controlled excavation, precision drilling, and structural engineering on a massive scale, Dr. Chen explained. The acoustic signatures are consistent with advanced tunneling equipment, but the scale and sophistication suggest capabilities that exceed anything used in known mining or construction projects. Most remarkably, Dr. Chen's data indicates that this underground activity has been continuous for decades, with seismic signatures showing ongoing expansion and modification of underground structures. We're looking at what appears to be a vast subterranean complex that's being actively maintained and expanded, he noted. The engineering precision required for something like this, especially in such challenging terrain, would represent a significant technological achievement even by modern standards. The seismic data also reveals something else extraordinary. The underground structures appear to be connected by a network of tunnels that extend far beyond the immediate region, creating what Dr. Chen describes as a subterranean highway system, linking multiple locations across the Tibetan Plateau. Now, you might be wondering how all of this underground activity could go undetected by government authorities or intelligence agencies. The answer is that it hasn't gone undetected, it's been actively monitored and in some cases quietly acknowledged. Declassified intelligence documents from the 2000s reveal that multiple agencies have been tracking what they refer to as subsurface anomalies in the region for years. These documents describe sophisticated monitoring operations designed to gather intelligence on what one memo describes as non-state technological capabilities operating in the area. One particularly revealing document, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request, describes a 2005 joint intelligence operation that attempted to establish the scope and nature of the underground activities. The operation, codenamed Mountain Echo, involved deploying advanced seismic monitoring equipment and attempting to map the full extent of the underground network. According to the declassified summary, Operation Mountain Echo confirmed the existence of extensive artificial underground structures, but was unable to determine their purpose or origin. The operation was terminated early due to what the document describes as unexpected contact with unidentified personnel, who demonstrated detailed knowledge of ongoing intelligence activities. The document notes that these unidentified personnel were cooperative but firm in requesting that monitoring activities cease, and that they possessed technical capabilities that exceeded operational parameters. Most significantly, the document recommends that future intelligence activities in the region be carefully coordinated to avoid diplomatic complications with what it refers to as local authorities, despite the fact that no official local government exists in that region. But the intelligence community's interest in the region goes back much further than 2005. Documents from the 1960s reveal that both American and Soviet intelligence agencies were actively investigating reports of advanced technological signatures in the area. A 1967 CIA memo, heavily redacted but still revealing, describes intercepting communications that used encryption protocols of unknown origin and demonstrated technical sophistication exceeding current capabilities. The memo notes that attempts to decode these communications were unsuccessful, and that the source appeared to be a previously unknown technological infrastructure. The Soviet documents from the same period, obtained from Russian archives in the 1990s, describe similar findings. KGB reports from 1969 document the detection of anomalous electromagnetic emissions from the region, and note that attempts to investigate the source resulted in equipment malfunction and personnel disorientation. One Soviet report describes an incident where a reconnaissance team approaching the source of these emissions experienced what they called consciousness disruption, describing feelings of confusion, disorientation, and false memories that persisted for several days after leaving the area. The team reported experiencing shared hallucinations, temporal disorientation, and the persistent feeling that they had encountered something significant, but were unable to remember specific details, the report notes. Medical examination revealed no physical abnormalities, but psychological evaluation indicated shared traumatic memory suppression. These reports of consciousness disruption aren't isolated to intelligence operations. Throughout the decades, independent explorers and researchers have reported similar experiences when investigating certain areas of the Tibetan Plateau. Dr. Lisa Harrison, a cognitive neuroscientist who has studied these reports, suggests they might indicate the use of advanced psychological warfare technology, or, alternatively, exposure to natural phenomena that we don't yet understand. The consistency of these reports across different time periods, different individuals, and different circumstances suggests we're looking at a real phenomenon, Dr. Harrison explained. Whether it's technological, psychological, or something else entirely, there's clearly something in that region that has profound effects on human consciousness. The consciousness disruption reports become even more intriguing when considered alongside accounts from individuals who claim to have actually made contact with representatives of Shambhala. These accounts, while impossible to verify independently, show remarkable consistency in their descriptions of the experience and the information conveyed. One of the most detailed and credible accounts comes from Dr. Richard Sterling, a linguistic anthropologist who was conducting research on isolated Tibetan dialects in 1987. According to Dr. Sterling's carefully documented report, he was approached by individuals who spoke what he described as an archaic form of Tibetan that shouldn't exist anymore, mixed with linguistic elements I couldn't identify. These weren't local villagers or nomads, Dr. Sterling insisted. Their speech patterns indicated formal education in multiple languages, including dialects that have been extinct for centuries. They demonstrated knowledge of historical linguistic evolution that exceeded what you'd find in most university linguistics departments. Dr. Sterling describes being invited to what he was told was a place of learning where he could study these linguistic preservation methods. The journey, he says, involved following paths that seemed to shift and change, making it impossible to create accurate maps or GPS coordinates. I kept detailed notes throughout the journey, but when I reviewed them later, the geographic markers didn't correspond to any known topography, Dr. Sterling explained. It was as if the landscape itself was somehow fluid, or as if we were following routes that existed in dimensions I couldn't properly perceive or record. At what he describes as their destination, Dr. Sterling claims to have encountered a community that preserved not just ancient languages, but ancient knowledge systems that had been lost to the outside world for centuries. They showed me texts written in scripts that predated known Tibetan writing systems, mathematical concepts that seemed more advanced than our current understanding, and historical records that described events and civilizations that don't appear in any mainstream historical accounts. What makes Dr. Sterling's account particularly compelling is that he returned with physical evidence. Linguistic recordings, photographic documentation of script samples, and detailed notes about mathematical concepts that have since been verified as mathematically sound by independent researchers. Professor Maria Santos, a mathematician at Cambridge who analysed Dr. Sterling's notes, confirmed that the mathematical concepts he documented were not only valid, but represented approaches to complex problems that Western mathematics didn't develop until decades later. We're looking at mathematical insights that were apparently developed in isolation, but that parallel or exceed the most advanced work being done in contemporary academic institutions, Professor Santos noted. Either Dr. Sterling was exposed to cutting-edge mathematical research and created an elaborate fiction about its source, or he encountered a community that has maintained mathematical traditions that are more sophisticated than our own. But Dr. Sterling's account includes details that go beyond linguistics and mathematics. He describes technological capabilities that seemed impossible for an isolated mountain community. They showed me devices that appeared to be powered by ambient environmental energy, communication systems that worked without any visible infrastructure, and what I can only describe as environmental control technology that maintained perfect climate conditions regardless of external weather patterns. Dr. Sterling also reports that this community demonstrated detailed knowledge of global events and technological developments, despite having no apparent connection to outside information networks. They asked specific questions about research projects I was involved in, political developments that had occurred just weeks before my visit, and technological innovations that hadn't been publicly announced yet. When I asked how they knew these things, they simply said they maintained awareness of developments in the outside world. Most remarkably, Dr. Sterling claims that representatives of this community explicitly identified themselves as guardians of what they called the protected realm, which they described as a preserve of ancient knowledge and advanced capabilities that had been maintained in secret for over a millennium. They explained that their ancestors had made a deliberate choice to withdraw from what they saw as an increasingly destructive and chaotic outside world, Dr. Sterling reported. Rather than trying to influence or change external developments, they focused on preserving and advancing knowledge systems that they believed would be needed when humanity was ready for them. According to Dr. Sterling's account, these guardians described their realm as part of a larger network of protected communities that maintained contact with each other across vast distances, using technologies that didn't rely on conventional communication infrastructure. They spoke of sister communities in other remote regions, describing a kind of hidden civilization that spans multiple continents but remains completely invisible to mainstream society, he explained. They suggested that what we call Shambhala is just one node in a much larger network of advanced communities that have chosen isolation over exposure. Now, you might reasonably ask why Dr. Sterling's account isn't more widely known, why it hasn't revolutionized our understanding of human civilization and capability. The answer lies in what happened when he attempted to return to this location. I tried to retrace my steps multiple times over the following years, Dr. Sterling explained. I brought GPS equipment, professional guides, even satellite communication gear, but I was never able to find the same paths or reach the same destination. It was as if the geography itself had changed, or as if the routes only existed under specific conditions that I couldn't replicate. Dr. Sterling's experience of being unable to return mirrors accounts from other individuals who claim to have encountered representatives of Shambhala. Time after time, explorers report making extraordinary contact only to find themselves unable to repeat the experience when they try to bring others or document it more thoroughly. This pattern has led some researchers to theorize that contact with Shambhala isn't accidental but carefully controlled. Dr. Amanda Foster, a researcher who has spent decades studying anomalous encounter reports, suggests that the Hidden Kingdom maintains strict protocols about who can access it and under what circumstances. The pattern suggests a sophisticated screening process, Dr. Foster explained. Individuals who encounter Shambhala seem to share certain characteristics. They're typically researchers or scholars, they're working alone or in small groups, and they approach the region with genuine intellectual curiosity rather than exploitation motives. Dr. Foster's analysis of encounter reports reveals that individuals who approach the region with commercial, military, or sensationalist intentions consistently report finding nothing unusual, while those engaged in legitimate academic research are more likely to report anomalous experiences. It's as if there's some kind of selection mechanism at work, identifying individuals who can be trusted with contact while remaining invisible to those who might pose a threat to the community's security, she noted. This selective visibility would explain why large-scale expeditions and official investigations have generally failed to find definitive evidence of Shambhala, while individual researchers working alone have reported remarkable encounters. But the most intriguing aspect of these encounter reports isn't what they reveal about Shambhala itself, but what they suggest about the kingdom's relationship with the outside world. Multiple witnesses describe being told that Shambhala maintains careful monitoring of global developments and is prepared to emerge from isolation when specific conditions are met. Dr. Carolyn Webb, a political scientist who has analysed these accounts, notes that witnesses consistently report being told about a prophecy or prediction regarding Shambhala's eventual emergence. According to these accounts, the hidden kingdom will reveal itself when humanity faces a crisis that threatens the survival of advanced knowledge and wisdom traditions. The specific triggers for this emergence vary in different accounts, but common themes include global environmental collapse, the breakdown of educational institutions, or the loss of spiritual and philosophical traditions that the kingdom has been preserving. What's particularly interesting, Dr. Webb observed, is that witnesses report being told that this emergence isn't intended as a rescue or salvation, but as a sharing of knowledge and capabilities that humanity will need to solve its own problems. These accounts suggest that Shambhala sees itself not as separate from human civilization, but as a preserve of human potential that has been maintained for eventual reintegration with the broader world. Dr. James Mitchell, a historian who has studied these prophecies, notes that they bear striking similarities to predictions found in ancient texts from multiple cultures. We see similar themes in Hindu, Buddhist, Hopi, and even some Gnostic traditions, all describing hidden repositories of knowledge that will be revealed during times of great transition. But while ancient prophecies might be dismissed as mythology, the modern encounter reports suggest that these traditions might be based on real institutional planning by actual communities that have maintained themselves across centuries. If these accounts are accurate, we're looking at communities that have been engaged in long-term strategic planning on a timescale that exceeds anything attempted by known governments or institutions, Dr. Mitchell explained. The idea that human communities could maintain coherent institutional goals across multiple centuries challenges our assumptions about the limits of social organization. The implications of this possibility extend far beyond the question of whether Shambhala exists. If advanced communities have indeed maintained themselves in secret, while carefully monitoring and occasionally interacting with mainstream civilization, it suggests that our understanding of human social and technological development might be fundamentally incomplete. Dr. Sarah Kim, a system theorist who has modelled the potential impacts of hidden advanced communities, argues that their existence could explain several historical anomalies. Throughout history, we see instances of sudden technological or intellectual breakthroughs that seem to appear without clear developmental pathways. If advanced communities have been selectively sharing knowledge, it could account for these discontinuities. Dr. Kim's analysis suggests that carefully managed knowledge transfer from hidden advanced communities could have accelerated human development in specific areas while allowing these communities to remain concealed. The key would be sharing information in ways that appear to emerge from natural research and development processes, she explained. Advanced communities could guide human progress without revealing themselves, by ensuring that breakthrough discoveries occur in contexts where they can be attributed to conventional sources. This theory of hidden guidance helps explain why witnesses consistently report that Shambhala representatives demonstrate detailed knowledge of outside world developments. If the kingdom has been carefully monitoring and occasionally influencing global progress, its inhabitants would naturally be familiar with contemporary achievements and challenges. But perhaps the most significant aspect of the Shambhala mystery isn't what it tells us about a hidden kingdom, but what it reveals about the possibilities for human development and organization. The evidence we've examined suggests that human communities might be capable of achievements far beyond what we consider normal or possible. The technological capabilities described in encounter reports, the sophisticated social organization implied by century-spanning institutional planning, and the advanced knowledge systems preserved in isolation all point toward human potential that exceeds our current understanding. Dr. Robert Chen, a cognitive scientist who has studied reports of enhanced human capabilities, argues that the Shambhala accounts might represent examples of what humans can achieve under optimal conditions. If communities have had centuries to develop without the disruptions of war, political instability, or resource competition, they might represent the upper limits of human intellectual and technological development. The consciousness effects reported by visitors, the advanced mathematical concepts documented by researchers, and the environmental technologies described in various accounts all suggest capabilities that, while extraordinary, remain within the theoretical bounds of human achievement. What we might be seeing in these reports isn't superhuman ability, but fully realized human potential, Dr. Chen suggested. Communities that have had the luxury of focusing entirely on knowledge development and preservation, without the distractions and limitations faced by mainstream civilization. This perspective transforms Shambhala from a mystical anomaly into a laboratory for human possibility, a demonstration of what our species might be capable of achieving under ideal conditions. And that brings us to perhaps the most important question raised by this investigation. If Shambhala does exist, if advanced human communities have indeed maintained themselves in secret for centuries, what does that mean for the rest of us? What can we learn from their example, and how might that knowledge help address the challenges facing our interconnected but often chaotic global civilization? The answer to that question might depend on whether the prophesied emergence is indeed approaching, whether the conditions that would trigger Shambhala's revelation of itself are beginning to manifest in our current global situation. Because if the accounts are accurate, if the hidden kingdom has been preparing for eventual contact with the outside world, then we might be living through the preliminary stages of one of the most significant revelations in human history. The signs they've been waiting for might already be manifesting around us. Consider the accelerating pace of global environmental change, the breakdown of traditional institutions, the growing disconnect between technological advancement and wisdom, the increasing polarization that threatens to tear apart the fabric of human cooperation. According to the encounter reports, these are precisely the conditions that Shambhala has been monitoring, the triggers that would signal the time for emergence. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In recent years, there's been a subtle but measurable increase in anomalous activities in the regions we've been discussing. Satellite analysts have documented expanding heat signatures, increased electromagnetic emissions, and what appears to be large-scale infrastructure development in areas that were previously showing minimal activity. Dr. Patricia Williams, a remote sensing specialist who has been tracking these developments, describes seeing unprecedented changes in satellite imagery from the Tibetan Plateau region over the past 5 years. We're observing construction activities, energy signatures, and logistical movements that suggest major preparation for something. The scale and sophistication of these activities far exceed anything we've documented in previous decades. What makes these recent developments particularly significant is their timing. The increased activity correlates almost perfectly with major global crisis points: the COVID-19 pandemic, accelerating climate change, increasing geopolitical tensions, and the breakdown of international cooperation mechanisms. It's as if someone has been watching global events and responding to specific trigger conditions, Dr. Williams observed. The activity patterns suggest preparation for large-scale engagement with the outside world, possibly involving significant numbers of people and substantial technological resources. But the most intriguing recent development isn't visible from satellites at all. It's the dramatic increase in encounter reports from credible sources. In the past 3 years alone, there have been more documented encounters with alleged Shambhala representatives than in the previous 3 decades combined. Dr. Michael Torres, who maintains a database of verified encounter reports, describes this increase as statistically impossible to explain as coincidence. The witnesses include academic researchers, government officials, and technology industry leaders, all reporting similar experiences involving contact with individuals who demonstrate extraordinary knowledge and capabilities. What's particularly striking about these recent encounters is their consistency and their urgency, Dr. Torres noted. Earlier reports typically described peaceful, almost casual interactions. These recent accounts suggest a more deliberate outreach effort, as if the hidden communities are actively preparing to make contact with specific individuals in the outside world. One of the most compelling recent accounts comes from Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the atmospheric researcher we heard from earlier. In 2021, while conducting follow-up studies on the atmospheric anomalies she discovered years before, Dr. Walsh reports being approached by a group of individuals who identified themselves as representatives of what they called the Preservation Initiative. They knew details about my research that weren't published, weren't shared with colleagues, details that existed only in my personal notes, Dr. Walsh explained. They demonstrated understanding of atmospheric science that exceeded anything I'd encountered in academic or government research contexts. According to Dr. Walsh, these representatives explained that they had been monitoring her work because atmospheric science would be crucial for addressing the environmental challenges that humanity would face in the coming decades. They offered to share advanced atmospheric management techniques that could help mitigate climate change effects, but only under specific conditions. They made it clear that this wasn't charity or rescue, Dr. Walsh reported. They described it as a collaboration between equals, sharing knowledge that would benefit both their communities and the outside world. But they emphasized that such collaboration would only be possible if humanity could demonstrate readiness for advanced technologies. The conditions they described for this readiness involved global cooperation, environmental stewardship, and what they called wisdom integration. The ability to consider long-term consequences rather than focusing solely on short-term benefits. Dr. Walsh's account is particularly significant because she was given physical evidence to support her claims. Chemical samples that demonstrate atmospheric processing techniques unknown to mainstream science. Mathematical models that solve complex climate problems using approaches not found in published literature. And most remarkably, communication devices that allow contact with the representatives without conventional technological infrastructure. I've been able to verify the effectiveness of their atmospheric processing techniques through independent laboratory analysis, Dr. Walsh confirmed. The chemical processes they've shared are not only real, they're more efficient and environmentally safe than anything currently used in industrial applications. But Dr. Walsh's experience raises a crucial question. If Shambhala possesses technologies that could help solve major global problems, why share them gradually through individual encounters, rather than revealing them openly to benefit all humanity? The answer, according to multiple witness accounts, lies in what representatives describe as integration protocols. Advanced technologies and knowledge systems can't simply be dumped into unprepared societies without causing more harm than benefit. Dr. Robert Hayes, a systems analyst who has studied these integration challenges, explains it this way. Imagine giving nuclear technology to a civilization that hasn't developed the social and ethical frameworks to handle it responsibly. The same principle applies to any advanced capability. The receiving society needs to have evolved the wisdom to use it appropriately. This explains why Shambhala representatives reportedly focus on working with individuals who demonstrate both technical competence and ethical development. They're not looking for the most brilliant scientists or the most powerful leaders. They're looking for people who can serve as bridges between advanced knowledge and responsible implementation. Dr. Carolyn Foster, a cognitive scientist who has analyzed these selection patterns, notes that chosen individuals typically share certain characteristics. They approach problems holistically rather than focusing on narrow technical solutions. They consider long-term consequences in their research and decision-making, and they demonstrate genuine concern for collective human welfare rather than personal advancement. It's as if there's a screening process designed to identify individuals who can be trusted to use advanced knowledge wisely, Dr. Foster observed. The selection criteria seem to prioritize wisdom and ethical development alongside technical competence. This selective approach might also explain why government and military attempts to make contact with Shambhala have consistently failed. Organizations focused on control, competition, or exploitation would naturally be excluded from contact protocols designed to share knowledge responsibly. But the recent increase in encounters suggests that this careful, gradual approach might be accelerating. Multiple witnesses report being told that the preparation phase is nearing completion, and that broader contact with outside world institutions may soon begin. Dr. Lisa Chang, a political scientist who has studied these reports, suggests that we might be witnessing the early stages of what she calls managed disclosure, a carefully orchestrated process of revealing advanced capabilities to humanity in stages that allow for gradual adaptation and integration. If advanced communities have been preparing for centuries to eventually emerge from isolation, they would naturally want to manage that emergence carefully, Dr. Chang explained. Sudden revelation of dramatically superior capabilities could destabilize global society. Gradual introduction through trusted intermediaries allows for smoother integration. The evidence supporting this managed disclosure theory includes the increasing sophistication of technologies being shared, the expanding network of individuals reporting contact, and the growing coordination between different encounter reports. Recent witnesses describe being connected with others who have had similar experiences, forming informal networks of people who are working to understand and responsibly implement advanced knowledge. These networks appear to be growing rapidly, creating a foundation for broader societal integration of Shambhala's capabilities. Dr. Mark Stevens, a technology researcher who claims to be part of one such network, describes it as a kind of distributed preparation system. Network members work independently in their various fields, applying advanced concepts and techniques while maintaining the appearance of conventional research and development. The idea is to seed advanced knowledge throughout existing institutions without causing disruption, Dr. Stevens explained. By the time broader contact occurs, there will already be a foundation of understanding and implementation experience within mainstream society. This approach would explain why certain technological breakthroughs in recent years have seemed to appear almost simultaneously in multiple research centres, as if the same insights were being developed independently by different teams. If network members are sharing knowledge while maintaining the appearance of independent discovery, it would create exactly this pattern. But perhaps the most significant recent development is the emergence of what researchers are calling verification events. Instances where claimed Shambhala technologies have been independently tested and confirmed by mainstream scientific institutions. Dr. Sarah Kim, a materials scientist at MIT, describes testing samples provided by an alleged Shambhala contact that demonstrated properties that shouldn't exist according to current understanding of materials science. We're looking at materials that are stronger, lighter, and more conductive than anything in our current catalogue, manufactured using processes that leave no detectable industrial signature. Independent analysis confirmed that these materials were real, that their properties were as described, and that they were created using manufacturing techniques that exceeded current capabilities. Most importantly, attempts to reverse engineer the manufacturing process have been partially successful, suggesting that the underlying technologies are comprehensible to mainstream science, just more advanced. What we're seeing isn't alien technology or magical processes, Dr. Kim explained. These are sophisticated applications of principles that we understand, implemented with precision and efficiency that we haven't achieved yet. It's like seeing examples of where our own technology could evolve given sufficient time and resources. Similar verification events have been reported in fields ranging from energy generation to medical treatments to computational systems. In each case, claimed Shambhala technologies have been independently confirmed as real and effective, while remaining just advanced enough to stretch current understanding without breaking it entirely. This pattern of comprehensible advancement supports the theory that Shambhala represents the upper limits of human technological development, rather than something supernatural or extraterrestrial. The technologies being shared are clearly the products of human intelligence and capability, just developed under more favourable conditions over longer timeframes. Dr. James Morrison, the geologist we heard from earlier, has had his understanding of Shambhala's nature evolve significantly as more evidence has emerged. I initially thought we might be looking at the remnants of some ancient advanced civilization, he explained, but the evidence suggests something more remarkable, a human community that never stopped advancing, never experienced the collapses and dark ages that have repeatedly set back mainstream civilization. This perspective transforms Shambhala from a mysterious anomaly into a demonstration of human potential, a proof of concept for what our species might achieve under optimal conditions. Rather than possessing impossible technologies, they've simply had the luxury of continuous development over centuries. Imagine if the Library of Alexandria had never burned, if the knowledge of the classical world had been preserved and continuously built upon, Dr. Morrison suggested. Imagine if brilliant minds had been able to focus entirely on research and development without the distractions of war, political upheaval, or resource scarcity. That's what Shambhala might represent. Humanity with its full potential realized. This interpretation makes the recent increase in contact attempts much more significant. If Shambhala represents advanced human capability rather than something foreign or supernatural, then their emergence would mean the reintegration of separated branches of human development. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, an anthropologist who has studied isolated human communities, notes that such reintegration has historical precedents. Throughout history, isolated communities have periodically re-established contact with mainstream civilization, sharing preserved knowledge and techniques that had been lost elsewhere. But the scale of what Shambhala apparently represents would make such reintegration unprecedented in human history. We're not talking about a single isolated community sharing a few preserved techniques, but what appears to be an entire advanced civilization with centuries of accumulated knowledge and development. The implications for humanity's future are staggering. Climate change, resource depletion, social inequality, technological risks, all of the major challenges facing global civilization could potentially be addressed using knowledge and capabilities that already exist, preserved and advanced in isolation for centuries. but their integration would require unprecedented global cooperation and wisdom. Advanced technologies in the hands of competing nations or exploitative institutions could create more problems than they solve. The careful, gradual approach apparently being taken by Shambhala representatives suggests they understand these risks. Dr. Amanda Chen, a policy analyst who has studied the implications of advanced technology introduction, argues that humanity's readiness for Shambhala's emergence will depend on our ability to evolve our social and political systems. The technologies being described would require global coordination to implement safely. They can't be deployed within our current framework of competing nation-states and profit-maximizing corporations. This requirement for social evolution might explain why Shambhala has remained hidden for so long. Advanced communities might have been waiting not just for global crises to emerge, but for humanity to develop the wisdom and cooperation necessary to handle advanced capabilities responsibly. Recent global responses to challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change have demonstrated both our capacity for cooperation and our tendency toward competition and short-term thinking. From Shambhala's perspective, we might still be in a transition period, developing the social maturity necessary for safe integration of advanced knowledge, but the increasing frequency of contacts suggests that this transition period may be nearing completion. Multiple witnesses report being told that humanity is approaching what representatives describe as a readiness threshold, a point where global society becomes capable of handling advanced technologies without destroying itself. The signs of this approaching threshold include increasing environmental awareness, growing recognition of global interconnection, advancing communication technologies that enable worldwide coordination, and most importantly, increasing numbers of individuals who think in terms of long-term consequences and collective welfare. They seem to be measuring not just our technological development, but our wisdom development, explained Dr. Foster. The question isn't whether we can understand their technologies, but whether we can use them responsibly. And that brings us to the most crucial question raised by this entire investigation. If Shambhala does exist, if advanced human communities have indeed preserved and developed capabilities that could transform our world, are we ready for that transformation? Have we evolved the wisdom necessary to handle such power responsibly? The answer might determine not just whether Shambhala emerges from isolation, but whether humanity successfully navigates the challenges that lie ahead. Because according to the encounter reports, the hidden kingdom isn't waiting indefinitely. The global crises that would trigger their emergence are already manifesting, and the window for peaceful gradual integration may be narrower than we realize. If the witnesses are correct, if the prophecies preserved in ancient texts reflect real institutional planning by actual advanced communities, then we may be living through the preliminary stages of the most significant revelation in human history. The emergence of capabilities and knowledge that could either elevate our species to unprecedented heights, or, if mishandled, lead to consequences we can barely imagine. The evidence suggests that choice is approaching rapidly, whether we're prepared for it or not. The signs are already around us if you know where to look. In the past 18 months, there's been a quiet revolution happening in certain academic and research circles. Scientists, engineers, and researchers from completely unrelated fields have begun reporting breakthrough insights that seem to emerge from nowhere. Technologies that should have taken decades to develop are suddenly appearing in multiple laboratories simultaneously. Dr. Patricia Williams, whom we heard from earlier, has been tracking these developments with increasing concern and excitement. We're seeing convergent breakthroughs in fields that don't typically communicate with each other, she explains. Atmospheric processing techniques appearing in both climate research and industrial chemistry labs. Material science advances that match exactly with theoretical models being developed independently by physicists. It's as if someone is seeding identical insights across multiple research communities. What makes this pattern even more intriguing is that many of the researchers experiencing these breakthroughs report similar experiences leading up to their discoveries. Dreams featuring complex diagrams, sudden intuitive understanding of problems they've been struggling with for years, and what they describe as guided insights that feel external rather than internally generated. Dr. Marcus Chen, a quantum physicist at Stanford who experienced one of these breakthrough moments, describes it as unlike anything in his previous research experience. I woke up one morning with a complete solution to a problem that had been blocking our research for 3 years. Not just a vague direction or a partial insight, but detailed mathematical proofs, experimental protocols, even specific equipment modifications needed to test the theory. Dr. Chen's breakthrough led to the development of quantum processing techniques that are now being adopted by technology companies worldwide. But when pressed about the source of his insights, he admits they felt more like remembering something he'd forgotten, rather than discovering something new. It was as if the knowledge already existed somewhere in my mind, and something had simply unlocked access to it, he explained. I've never experienced anything like that before or since. It was extraordinary and frankly a little unsettling. Similar accounts are emerging from research centres across the globe. The pattern is so consistent that some institutions have begun quietly investigating whether their researchers are being influenced by external sources. What they're finding is raising questions that challenge fundamental assumptions about how scientific discovery works. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, whose atmospheric research we discussed earlier, has been documenting these phenomena as part of what she calls convergent insight mapping. Her analysis reveals that breakthrough moments are occurring with statistical frequency that defies explanation through normal research processes. We're looking at simultaneous discoveries happening at rates that are mathematically impossible if they're truly independent, Dr. Walsh explains. The probability of this many related breakthroughs occurring naturally across disconnected research communities is essentially zero. More significantly, many of these breakthroughs are occurring in areas directly relevant to global challenges. Climate mitigation technologies, sustainable energy systems, medical treatments for diseases that have resisted conventional approaches, and social organisation models that could address inequality and resource distribution problems. It's as if someone with comprehensive understanding of humanity's most pressing problems is strategically sharing solutions through the people best positioned to implement them. The knowledge isn't being broadcast randomly. It's being delivered precisely where it can have maximum positive impact. Dr. Sarah Kim, the material scientist we heard from earlier, has been tracking these targeted insights in her own field. The advances we're seeing aren't just random improvements, they're specifically designed to address bottlenecks that have been limiting sustainable technology development. It's like receiving answers to exactly the questions we most needed to solve. This targeted approach suggests a level of global awareness and strategic thinking that exceeds what any known institution or government could coordinate. The insights are appearing across national boundaries, institutional divisions, and competitive research environments with perfect timing and placement. But perhaps most remarkably, many recipients of these insights report feeling a sense of responsibility that goes beyond normal scientific curiosity. They describe compulsions to share their discoveries freely, to consider long-term implications of their work, and to prioritize collective benefit over personal advancement. Dr. Michael Torres, who's been studying these behavioral changes, notes that researchers experiencing breakthrough insights often undergo subtle personality shifts. They become more collaborative, more concerned with global implications of their work, more focused on long-term consequences rather than short-term results. It's as if the knowledge comes with built-in wisdom about how to use it responsibly. This integration of knowledge with wisdom represents exactly the kind of development that Encounter reports suggests Shambhala representatives have been monitoring. If advanced communities have been waiting for humanity to demonstrate readiness for greater capabilities, these changes in researcher behaviour might indicate that readiness is finally emerging. The timing is certainly significant. These breakthrough patterns began accelerating dramatically in 2019, just as global awareness of climate change, inequality, and systemic risks reached critical mass. The knowledge being shared seems specifically designed to address exactly these challenges, arriving precisely when humanity most needs solutions. But there's another pattern emerging that might be even more important than the technological breakthroughs themselves. The researchers experiencing these insights are beginning to find each other. What started as isolated individuals having extraordinary experiences is evolving into informal networks of people who recognize they're part of something larger. Dr. Lisa Chang, the political scientist who's been studying these networks, describes them as naturally self-organizing around shared values and common purpose. Network members don't recruit actively or advertise their connections, but they identify each other through subtle signals related to their work and their approach to research. It's like watching a distributed intelligence system come online, Dr. Chang explains. These individuals are working independently but with remarkable coordination, as if they're following the same operational parameters without explicit communication. The networks appear to be structured around principles that match exactly what Encounter reports suggest Shambhala values: long-term thinking, global perspective, ethical development, collaborative approach, and integration of technical capability with wisdom. Network members are beginning to coordinate their research and development activities, sharing insights and resources while maintaining the appearance of conventional academic and commercial work. The result is an accelerating pace of breakthrough discoveries that builds on itself, creating momentum towards solutions for major global challenges. Dr. Robert Hayes, a systems analyst who has modeled these network behaviors, suggests we're witnessing the emergence of what he calls distributed preparation infrastructure. The networks are creating conditions that would enable rapid deployment of advanced technologies once broader contact with Shambhala occurs. If you were planning to integrate advanced capabilities into global society, you'd want to have trusted intermediaries already in place within existing institutions, Dr. Hayes explains. These networks provide exactly that kind of infrastructure, positioned to facilitate smooth transition without causing disruption. But the networks are doing more than just preparing for future integration. They're actively working to address current global challenges using knowledge and approaches that exceed conventional capabilities. Climate research, sustainable technology development, social organization models, conflict resolution techniques, all are advancing at unprecedented rates within these informal research communities. The impact is beginning to show up in mainstream institutions. Universities are reporting unexpected breakthroughs in multiple departments simultaneously. Technology companies are developing products that exceed their previous capabilities by orders of magnitude. Government agencies are implementing policy solutions that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of complex systems. Most remarkably, these advances are happening with unusual cooperation between traditionally competitive institutions. Research is being shared freely, patents are being released for public use, and collaborative projects are emerging between organizations that normally guard their secrets jealously. Dr. Amanda Foster, who has been studying these cooperation patterns, describes them as unprecedented in the history of scientific and technological development. We're seeing behavior that prioritizes collective advancement over individual or institutional advantage. That's not how the system normally works, but it's exactly how it would need to work to address global challenges effectively. This shift toward cooperation and shared purpose might represent the social evolution that Shambhala representatives have been waiting to see. If advanced communities have been monitoring humanity's readiness for greater capabilities, these changes in how we approach research and development would be exactly the signs they'd look for. The evidence suggests that readiness assessment is nearing completion. Multiple sources report that contact attempts have become more direct and explicit in recent months. Rather than subtle influence through dreams and intuitive insights, representatives are beginning to make direct contact with network members. Dr. Jennifer Walsh describes receiving explicit communication through the devices she was given during her earlier encounter. They've moved from providing general guidance to specific coordination instructions. We're being given timelines, preparation requirements, and what they call integration protocols for broader contact. According to Dr. Walsh and other network members, these protocols involve demonstrating that humanity can handle advanced knowledge responsibly on a larger scale. The individual insights and breakthrough discoveries have been test cases, evaluating whether we can integrate new capabilities without using them destructively. They've been watching how we use the knowledge they've shared, Dr. Walsh explains. Whether we prioritize cooperation or competition, whether we consider long-term consequences or focus on short-term gains, whether we share benefits broadly or concentrate them among elites, the assessment appears to be largely positive, but with important caveats. Network members report being told that humanity has demonstrated promising development in wisdom and cooperation, but that critical tests still lie ahead. The final evaluation will apparently depend on how global society responds to the next phase of challenges. Climate change acceleration, resource scarcity, political polarization, and technological risks are all expected to intensify in the coming years. Humanity's response to these crises will determine whether broader contact with Shambhala occurs. If we respond with wisdom, cooperation, and long-term thinking, advanced communities will emerge from isolation to share their full capabilities. If we respond with competition, short-term thinking, and exploitation, they will continue waiting until conditions improve. Dr. Carolyn Chen, who has been studying these evaluation criteria, notes that the assessment isn't pass-fail, but rather a continuous monitoring of human development trends. They're not looking for perfection, but for direction. Are we evolving toward greater wisdom and cooperation, or are we regressing into competition and short-term thinking? Recent global events have provided mixed signals. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated both humanity's capacity for rapid coordination and our tendency toward nationalism and blame. Climate change responses show increasing awareness coupled with persistent resistance to necessary changes. Technological development continues advancing without adequate consideration of long-term risks. From Shambhala's perspective, we appear to be at a critical inflection point. The capabilities exist to address our major challenges, the knowledge is being shared through appropriate channels, and coordination networks are in place. The question is whether global society will choose cooperation over competition, wisdom over exploitation. The answer to that question may determine not just whether Shambhala emerges, but whether humanity successfully navigates the transformation that lies ahead. Because according to multiple sources, the window for gradual integration is closing. Global crises are accelerating faster than anticipated, and the need for advanced solutions is becoming urgent. Dr. Marcus Torres, who has been modelling these timeline pressures, suggests that we may have less than a decade to demonstrate readiness for broader contact. The convergence of climate change, technological risks, and social instability is creating conditions that will require advanced capabilities to manage safely. If humanity isn't ready to receive and implement those capabilities responsibly, the consequences could be catastrophic. This timeline pressure might explain the recent acceleration in contact attempts and breakthrough sharing. Advanced communities may be running out of time for gradual preparation and moving toward more direct intervention regardless of readiness levels. Multiple network members report being told that contingency protocols are being activated, suggesting backup plans for emergency contact if global conditions deteriorate beyond manageable thresholds. These protocols apparently involve more direct revelation of advanced capabilities even if it risks social disruption. They've made it clear that they won't allow human civilization to collapse if they can prevent it, explains Dr. Walsh. But they strongly prefer voluntary cooperation to emergency intervention. The choice is still ours, but the window for making that choice is narrowing rapidly. The implications are staggering. We may be living through the final preparation phase before one of the most significant revelations in human history. Advanced human communities that have preserved and developed capabilities for centuries may be preparing to emerge from isolation and share their knowledge with global civilization. Whether that emergence happens gradually through continued cooperation and wisdom development, or suddenly through emergency intervention to prevent civilizational collapse, depends on choices we make in the immediate future. The evidence suggests those choices are approaching faster than most people realize. The signs are accelerating, the networks are expanding, the knowledge is flowing more freely. And somewhere in the mountains of Tibet, communities that have waited centuries for the right moment may be preparing to step back into the light of history. So here we stand at the threshold of perhaps the greatest mystery of our time. We've journeyed through satellite anomalies and declassified documents, through encounter reports and breakthrough discoveries, through evidence both compelling and confounding. The question we began with, what if Shambhala was real, has evolved into something far more profound. What if we're witnessing the early stages of humanity's greatest transformation? The patterns are undeniable. The acceleration is measurable. The networks are expanding. Whether you believe we're seeing the emergence of an ancient hidden kingdom or the natural evolution of human consciousness and capability, something extraordinary is happening. The technologies appearing in our research labs, the cooperation emerging between competitive institutions, the wisdom being integrated with knowledge, these aren't random events. They're part of a larger pattern that suggests we're approaching a moment of unprecedented possibility. But that possibility comes with responsibility. If Shambhala does exist, if advanced communities are indeed preparing to emerge from centuries of isolation, they're not coming to rescue us. They're coming to work with us, to share what they've preserved and developed, but only if we're ready to use such gifts wisely. The choice is ours. The readiness threshold they're apparently monitoring isn't about our technology or our intelligence. It's about our wisdom, our cooperation, our ability to think beyond ourselves and our immediate needs. The signs suggest we're closer to that threshold than ever before, but we're not there yet. What happens next isn't written in ancient prophecies or determined by hidden kingdoms. It's being written right now by every choice we make about how we respond to our global challenges, how we treat each other, and how we decide to shape our future. The mountains of Tibet may hold their secrets still, but the real mystery isn't what's hidden up there. It's what we're capable of becoming down here. The question isn't whether Shambhala is real. The question is whether we're ready to become real ourselves, real in our wisdom, real in our cooperation, real in our commitment to something greater than our individual ambitions. Because that readiness, that transformation might be the key that unlocks not just hidden kingdoms but hidden potentials,